So last week, AbbVie said that the FDA is extending its review of Rinvoq as a treatment for psoriatic arthritis. On the surface, isn't really that big of a deal. The FDA often requests data during its review, and if it's too much data, the FDA has the right to extend the review period by 3 months. But AbbVie said it was due to the FDA requesting, quote, updated assessment of the risk-benefit profile, which doesn't sound too promising. They received a similar request from the FDA related to the application for atopic dermatitis. Rinvoq is a JAK inhibitor, which is a class of drugs that's had some issues with side effects. Can you talk about the history of JAK inhibitors and why there may be more than meets the eye to this FDA request?
Yeah, I think it is that history of JAK inhibitors that makes this more concerning than it might otherwise be. If you go way back, so there are several JAK inhibitors that have already been approved. Pfizer's Xeljanz, for example, was approved back in 2012, I think, for treating rheumatoid arthritis. Incyte developed a drug that Lilly licensed, and they ultimately won approval for it in rheumatoid arthritis in 2018. That drug's called Olumiant. And both of those are JAK inhibitors, and both receive black box warnings on their labels related to blood clotting or thrombosis. And for viewers who are not familiar with what those black box labels are, they're the most serious FDA warnings about safety. They don't prevent the drug from being approved, but if you read that label, the reason why it's called black box is it is a thick black box around this serious safety warning. And so both of these drugs receive those black box warnings. And but that's not the only problem. Earlier this year, so Pfizer received approval for Xeljanz, of course. Earlier this year, Pfizer reported results from a post-marketing safety study that they were required to conduct, and Xeljanz flopped. More patients taking Xeljanz had cardiovascular events, more developed cancer than did patients in the real world who took TNF inhibitors such as Humira and Enbrel. And that was really concerning, and that raised more questions about JAK inhibitors as a class. Last year, Gilead Sciences tried to get FDA approval of a drug that it had licensed from Galapagos. That's called filgotinib. They were looking for a rheumatoid arthritis approval there. It also was a JAK inhibitor, and the FDA rejected the drug because of safety concerns. So there's definitely kind of a murky history of JAK inhibitors. Now, Rinvoq has already been approved for one indication. It's already been approved last year, actually in 2019, for treating rheumatoid arthritis. And I think the real thing here, Brian, is that AbbVie has a lot riding on these additional approvals for Rinvoq. The company is counting on combined peak sales in the ballpark of $15 billion for Rinvoq and another relatively new autoimmune disease drug that it has on the market called Skyrizi. And those psoriatic arthritis and atopic dermatitis indications are pretty lucrative. I've seen analysts estimate that those two indications could be worth around $4 billion annually in sales. So that's a pretty big chunk of change that AbbVie is hoping to count on. And so this raises the question as to whether or not they'll get approval for these indications. Now, AbbVie says publicly that it's confident in the filings for Rinvoq. Of course, that's exactly what you'd expect the company to say. I would guess they'll probably still win approval, but I wouldn't say it's a 100% probability of it, because this does raise some serious questions.
Yeah, I think the FDA is really looking into this JAK inhibitors and wants to make sure that that they're approving them only for the most serious conditions, and especially
Right.
something like atopic dermatitis. There's a lot of other options, and then also it's skin problem, and it's certainly my wife has it. And it's not fun, but it's also not life threatening. And so you don't want to give them something that has a chance of killing them when you to treat something that that isn't nearly as bad.
Now, I would say though, AbbVie they know their game here. They've been in this autoimmune disease market for a long time. Humira has been the best-selling drug in the world for several years. So if any company can get an approval for a JAK inhibitor for these indications, I think it would be AbbVie. By the way, I'm also on shares of AbbVie, so I'm probably biased to some degree there, but I do think AbbVie has a great track record on this front. So if any company is going to win approvals, I think it'll be AbbVie, but I don't think it's a slam dunk.